All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to December's Google Hangout on Air, NHGEG, and this month's topic is on gamification and how we can gamify using the Google Suite. So we have a couple experts, if you will, and I'm sure they're going to say that they're not experts, but I'm going to use that term because these are people who have been very innovative and finding different ways and being creative of how they can actually gamify their lessons, their activities, as well as gamify some tech PD. So we've pulled in some people. We have Bob, I think it's Petitto. I'm probably butchering that. How do you say it?
Close. Petitto.
Petitto, I should have known that. I'm bad. I'm bad with names. Hooked on Phonics did not work for me, unfortunately. So Bob is joining us from Georgia, I believe. And then we have Jen Loughton, as you know, our co-GEG leader for New Hampshire. And then just going down the list, we have Jess Hatzidakis. I always butcher it, so I always say Hatsi, just so she doesn't get mad at me. And Jess is a colleague of mine who teaches, is a humanities teacher, co-teaches with another teacher. I believe it's 11th grade students this year. Next, we have Mary Murata. Mary has joined us before, tech integrator at Neshoba Regional. And then we have Meg Julius, who is also a teacher at Bedford High School, is a humanities teacher and teaches 9th graders, I believe. So without further ado, we're going to have Bob start things off, and maybe you can give us a little more spiel about who you are. But basically, long story short, my inspiration with gamification came from Bob. A blog post was shared edtechify.com if you've not visited before, and a colleague, a friend of mine, Mary Murata, actually shared his blog, said, hey, this person's doing some cool things, check him out. And so we asked if he'd join us today to share some things about what he's done and how he's gamified with Tech PD for teachers. So Bob, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Well, first off, just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to take part in your Hangout. It's a huge honor. The blog post that you were in reference to was something kind of out of a whim that I was kind of toying around with for a couple of months or so after trying to figure out more about what gamification is, and it was kind of my take on it at that time. First off, a little bit about me. I'm an instructional technology specialist at Woodward Academy now here in close to Atlanta, Georgia. College Park, Georgia. Before that, I was an instructional technology specialist in Illinois for 4 years at 2 different districts, at Valley View School District, where I kind of got my start as an instructional technology specialist, and where I kind of got my start with the whole gamification and badging in terms of using that in professional development. And then after that at Riverside, where I was able to, again, kind of further my skills in providing professional development and gamifying it along the way. But I really got my start in gamifying and the whole kind of concept of digital badging and so forth when I was a Spanish teacher at Glenbard North High School in Carroll Stream, Illinois. And where I kind of got started was when, I think it was back in 2010, when Edmodo first kind of came onto the scene, right? This is back in 2009, 2010. And then I read an article, a brand new feature in Edmodo, which allowed for the use of student badging. I'm like, oh, I gotta tap into this then, right? I was a Boy Scout. I was like, I loved collecting badges, and I was a long time video game player, so I saw the inherent kind of intrinsic motivation that can kind of get, or extrinsic motivation that can kind of get started when you use badging as a kind of a carrot on a stick, if you would. And so I toyed around with it with a little bit, kind of, giving my students a couple of badges if they first signed on to my Edmodo account, and a couple if they've completed their first assignment. And then I kind of shied away from it from a little bit. And then it wasn't until my students asked me, they came up and asked me, hey, when are you going to offer another badge that we can earn? I'm like, oh, I guess that's something that they really want. They want to have that mark, to say that, hey, I accomplished something. And after hearing that, I knew that this is something that not only students wanted, but eventually, as I got into instructional technology gig, this is something that even staff were looking for as well. And it started off not even as a digital badge. It started off as a physical pin that they would get whenever they completed a professional development with us, or we offered them at our conferences that we led. We'd actually create those, those little buttons, those little metal buttons, that little, that jab you if you put them in wrong. There's an excellent website. I'll share it in just a minute, where you can kind of make those yourselves. But that's kind of the start. And then we saw that our staff wanted to collect those as well whenever they came to a training. So I'm like, okay, this is something we have to tap into, right? And so then from there, I started doing more and more research on just the concept of gamification and what it is and what it's not, and the difference between gamification and just game-based learning, which a lot of us maybe, if you're new to the scene in gamification, kind of having to know the difference between the two. Where gamification is where you're taking something that's not a game, your classroom, your exercise schedule, your daily routines, and you turn them into a modifier, a game, by using game-based mechanics. And there's I think there's an official list somewhere on all the 72 game-based mechanics that you can use to implement in different types of game-based or gamification style platforms. That includes like leveling up and badging and collecting something, right? Getting random events and having avatars and equipment and items and defeating bosses and having experience points and things like that. So a lot of other non-game-based platforms have even tapped into this as well. Businesses along the way, like Salesforce is huge with gamification, where they're able to say, yep, our employees are going to level up throughout our system by when they give out sales and as they complete modules and this and that, and it gives them that sort of motivation to continue on in their platform, right? So anyway, as I was learning more about gamification, the more I was researching it, the more I came across articles based on just micro-credentialing and what the whole micro-credential is all about. And I thought, what a great concept that staff can take classes or complete different modules, and then they get like a certificate, let's say, like a badge or certificate that has all of the credentials and all of the metadata behind that digital badge or that certificate that lets whoever wants to see it know who the person is, what they completed, when they completed, what standards it aligns to, what the criteria was that they earned the badge, how long did they do that training in order to earn that badge. And that's all wrapped up in a nice, pretty little icon, right? So anybody who wants to know can dive deeper and take a look at it, and they're transferable. So if a staff member wants to do some training with me, and then say they leave my district or leave my school, they can bring that credential over to wherever they happen to be, and it would carry forward because they have all the metadata behind it. And so the big obstacle was trying to figure out what platform to use with my staff, because we didn't have a formal LMS. There's lots of learning management systems out there that do offer badging, Edmodo being one of them, Schoology, Canvas is really huge into badging now. Even Haiku Learning does a little bit of badging here and there, but we didn't have any of those. We didn't have a formal LMS in my last school district that I was at. What we did have was Google Apps. And so getting some inspiration from Alice Keeler, who's a spreadsheet queen. She dubbed herself a spreadsheet queen. Looking at her blog and seeing how she was able to use different formulas and this and that to kind of track progress along the way. I was able to kind of develop something similar, which also allowed for them to track their progress, and by the time they were finished, be able to earn a certificate. And then it was all done just through Google Sheets and formulas and hidden sheets and things like that. So I know Mary, I think I saw her comment on one of the posts or shared that out to Craig, and I was blown away by just the response that it got after posting it. I think this is back a year ago now.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool, and I think for some people, spreadsheets in general tend to be the tool that people don't want to deal with because either they don't understand it, they didn't receive a lot of training. I'm not a math person. I don't know how to I don't know how to do any of that stuff. But there is a lot of power behind, and I've seen it over the last. I'll admit it, over the last 2 years. I feel like I've been using spreadsheets a little more efficiently into my day-to-day job, as well as creatively. And I believe you're going to showcase, correct, that you had made a 30-day Chromebook challenge. And I think it'd be really cool for people to see that it's not just putting stuff in a cell. You do some really cool things to make it work, to get at what you want to get at. So Bob's gonna share his screen.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
All right. Is my screen live? Just let me know.
Not yet.
Okay.
While you get that going, I'll just go ahead and also state that what we've, based on the inspiration that we got from Bob, our two teachers, as well as two teachers who aren't here joining us, really got inspired, and then, in their own framework, they were the same. Like, okay, so how do we take this to another level? How do we engage our students? How do we make sure that we're doing what we want them to do? And we had just turned into a one-to-one program for our 9th graders. And so based on some of the work that Bob had done, as well as some of their own research, they were actually also able to mimic something similar through the use of Google Sheets. And so that's why Jess and Meg are also here to share some of that information as well. So it looks like your screen's all set, Bob.
Okay, so this is essentially it. I started off just by giving it a to-do list. So I had some tasks here, and I had, I wanted them to complete 30 tasks in 30 days, something that was simple to do every day, so they would kind of keep along with it. And I kind of got inspired this when I had first seen, I think it was over Christmas break of 2014, when I saw a Twitter challenge. It was like a 21-day Twitter challenge. Do one event a day and help you learn Twitter, right? But I wanted some way for them to keep track of it as well. So what I did is I did the 30 tasks, and I try to keep them as simple as possible, but also give them hints along the way. So every task is also a hyperlink to a website that has more information about that particular task. So maybe it's a screen grab, or maybe it's a how-to or a video tutorial or something along the way that help them complete that task, right? So I'll try to make it as self-contained and as self-guiding as possible. And then as they complete a task, they can click the drop-down box over here and choose between either the dash or the check mark, right? And if they choose the check mark, then over here in the status column, it displays that they completed it. And really all this is using two different, really, I guess, three different spreadsheet functions. So for those of you who are not spreadsheet queens or kings, right? It's okay. You can do this. This is actually pretty doable. So this first column here, to create a drop-down menu here in spreadsheets, is what's known as data validation. So you can find that by clicking over here in data and then going down to validation. And then you can choose your criteria being a list of items. And here it can be whatever list you want. You just comma separate it. So I had a dash and a check mark. You can use words. You could use numbers, or you can use symbols like I did. You can even use emojis if you were able to find those online. Use emojis. And then you click the box to show a drop down in a cell, right? And then on invalid data, I say reject input. That way they have to choose one of these two things. Right? You click on save, and then you can just copy your cells down by clicking and dragging, and then you have a drop-down box. Right? And now, so that's how you can do a drop-down box. And then for the status column, you see here, this took me probably, I don't know, close to an hour or so to figure out the ins and outs of doing the formula. And it was a lot. What's nice about Google Sheets as opposed to Excel is that they have help right here in the your function list right here in the help menu. So believe me, I spent quite often going back and forth between tabs and trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to accomplish and what is the correct function that would help me do this. This might not be the most efficient way or the most best practice in order to complete what I did here, but it works. So what basically all it's doing is it's checking to see, all right, is there a check mark in this column? If there is a check mark in this column, then it's going to display completed here. All right, so if this, then this. But I also wanted them to go in order, and that's where it was tricky, right? So if I skip number 4 here, and they do a check mark here, here you say it says wrong order. All right, and the reason and the way I was able to do this is I needed to check against a number order, cardinal number or ordinal numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where this day column comes into play. So I actually have this column, the status column, checking to see if the number of checks matches the day. Right, so here I have, if right now there's 4 checks, I'm on day 5. So 4 does not equal 5. So because 4 does not equal 5, here it's going to say wrong order. And that's where this count if is, right? So if it's counting the number of checks in this A column, if it's correct, then it's going to say completed on that certain day, and here's the month and day, right? And then, but if it's not, and that's the column, then it's going to check to see, is there a dot, dot, dot in the cell right above it? Okay, because if there's a dash right above it. If there is a dash, it's going to say dot, dot, dot here. Okay? If there's not a dash, if it's a check instead, then it's going to say wrong order. And the reason why I did this portion where it's the dot, dot, dot in the wrong order is that I started getting some errors because it was checking against something that wasn't there. So it's, again, this might not be the best practice in order to kind of complete what I was trying to do here, but it works. So I was happy with that.
And you don't have to necessarily require everyone to do it in a certain order.
No. Right?
You wanted to, so that's why your little script there looks maybe a little more complicated than what someone would necessarily do if they're not looking for something in order.
Exactly. If otherwise, it could just be something like this. If there is a check mark here, right, then it's going to display the date here. I can kind of tweak this code here. So I wouldn't need any of this.
Sure.
Right. All I would need is if, I guess, this date equals a check.
And I think what's also helpful is, finding examples of other people's work. And so, for instance, I didn't really know a lot about script writing with Excel, and you had mentioned that there's that help tool that can help you along the way. But it's also helpful if you see examples of other people's work, and you could say, "Oh, so how did so and so do that?" And you can work from there. Also helpful. I will admit.
Yep. Like that, right? Okay. So here, like if this equals a check mark, well, then you're going to say completed. All right. And if it's not, you can say, dot, 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 something like that. Right. And that's where it would be completed or not completed. And here I have a checking A6 rather than a dash. Yeah. Right. So it can be simpler, like you said, if you don't want to have the wrong order. You can just say, yeah, if it equals a check mark, then it shows completed. If it doesn't, it's going to show the dot, dot, dot. Again, I wanted something that was a little more complex, right? But again, then the cool thing is that I also wanted them to award them somehow. So what I did is that once you complete all of the check marks, here, oops, let me escape. Kind of fast forward and say I completed all 30. Then I have this kind of surprise box pop open. And again, this is all conditional statements as well. So this is all saying if there are 30 check marks, well, then this will appear. If it doesn't, it just nothing will appear. And it shows the name. All right, so they put their name in. And where I'm putting the name also is a conditional. So once I put my name in, then this box appears. And again, this is saying, okay, if there is something in this box, show this. If there's nothing, then show nothing, right? So here, if I delete the name, nothing shows up, right? And then this is basically just instructions saying, okay, you've gotten a certificate. You can view your certificate by going to View Hidden Sheets Certificate. So you can go to View Hidden Sheets, and Certificate, and then you'll see that a second sheet pops open with a certificate, with the name that they filled out to begin with my signature. And then they can print this, and then I made it so that they can actually print it out, and it'll be the size of a piece of paper, right? So it's 8.5 by 11. Now, if people are wise to this, so I also wanted to say, you know, if I'm going to be offering these over and over again, I don't want people just going to View Hidden Sheet Certificate and then printing off the certificate and not doing anything, right? So I also made it conditional the fact that there were still 30 checks, or the same amount of checks. So if they didn't complete it, let's say here, right, they have to go back to the certificate, then nothing will appear, right? It'll say, whoops, you have not yet completed the 30-day Chrome challenge. No signature, right? That kind of thing.
No signature for you.
No signature, no, exactly. Okay, so they have to have the correct number of check marks, right, in order for the information to appear.
Well, and no system is 100% going to stop people. You know, if people aren't going to want to do the work, they're not going to want to do the work, no matter how you set things up. But it's nice that actually doesn't show up if they don't complete the tasks.
Right, especially if you're talking about something free like Google Sheets is, right? I mean, obviously, there are systems like Schoology, or even there's some WordPress plugins that I'm playing around with now called Badge OS, or there's one called Learn Dash that I'm kind of playing around with that also will award you certificates and badges, and you have to complete things in a certain order in order for those to appear. But those are paid options, right? Where here this is free, so you get what you pay for.
Cool.
Yes, I'm just very honored that you're willing to take a look at this with me, and I'm just honored that I was able to share this with you, and I would love to see how you're using it and how you're implementing it in your district. Yeah.
So we're going to give it the floor to both Jess and Meg in a second here, but I do want to make sure that we let people know that these are the other two individuals who also had a big stake in this. On the left, this is Kristen Cooney, and on the right is Heath Inert, and they worked together with the two individuals that are here joining us on different ways of which they've decided to actually gamify some high school classes. So I think we're going to start with Jess, if you don't mind, Jess, and then we'll have Meg also share some other examples. And again, these are examples by which you can gamify lessons with students. So we're switching the side from teacher PD to student interaction. So Jess, you want to go for it?
Sure. Sounds good. And Meg, feel free to jump in because I'm going to start with our Roots research project.
Okay.
So feel free. So okay. Craig, I have a couple of, so I'm sharing my screen so we can look at a couple of materials.
Yep.
So are you guys seeing my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so I'm Jess Hatzidakis. I currently teach a juniors humanities class, so I'm an English teacher and I work with a social studies teacher in the same classroom. But last year I taught our freshman humanities class with my same partner, and Meg also taught it with her partner, Heath, Honor. And this is one of the projects that we created. We had this research project, research one of the original 13 colonies. And we wanted to figure out a way to encourage kids to move beyond their comfortable limits when it comes to research. So the part that I want to talk about here is this piece here. So we created an explorer as a part of our Age of Exploration unit, and they could improve their explorers for their journey by trying different research techniques, or we identified these places, working with databases, working with print resources, working with primary sources, web sources, record keeping, so how you gather all that information and keep track of it, and then perseverance, how we keep kids moving forward in problem solving. So I'm going to show you our researcher. He's our little researcher here, and you can see across the bottom that they have these choices for the same kinds of categories that we were talking about. So databases, for example, we identified some different things that we would like people to try with using databases. And a lot of times our students would simply go to a subscription database like ABC Clio, probably ABC Clio because it's the easiest and most accessible. But we wanted to encourage them to move past that and try some different things, like using something like RefMe to cite a source, or moving into a different database, looking at a database that might be specifically prescribed for them. So we, using much of the same technique, Craig actually provided us with the base for this. So, if a student found a resource in ABC Clio, they would come here and select it. It would confirm when they had done it. And we assigned these, based on our assessment of their difficulty, we assigned them different points. And as you can see, they can earn different caps for their journey. And so much the same thing here. Each of these was a different tool or resource, and they could come in and they could complete one. The minimum requirement was to complete one in each of the categories, but they could complete all of them potentially. We didn't. You'll notice, students aren't turning in evidence of any of these things. They're simply doing it on an honor system, and we were trying to figure out the way to reward students who challenged themselves a bit more. So the minimum requirement was 50 points worth of research activities, but we challenged students to complete more than that. And it was hard to come up with an appropriate compensation, but in the end, we decided that this portion of their grade, the final product, was going to be an annotated bibliography, that the annotations themselves, they were going to get to decide how much they were worth in the grade book. So if they did the minimum requirement, if they did 50 points, then they could only earn 30 points. I didn't like the fact that we used the word points twice, but they could only earn out of 30 points. And if they continued to do more, they could decide that they wanted their final product to be worth more. So the benefit was putting in the work, the reward became greater, which was pretty neat. It was pretty difficult. Meg's partner, Heath, spent a lot of time creating this here so that as the points changed in each of these, the outfits would change. It's obviously not a perfect system because finding clip art pictures that were going to match up perfectly with the size of our Explorer. As you can see, these boots are a tad bit small for our Explorer, but the idea was there, and our students seemed to really enjoy it. They had a good time trying that out, and were certainly excited as they saw their score improve or their Explorer become better equipped to travel through the new world, which was pretty neat. And then they also they realized that they wanted the big grade at the end because they had put in, all of this great work. And it really stemmed from the fact that we wanted them to feel invested in their research process. As a teacher in the past, we've had assignments that said you need to have, a minimum number of sources, and you need to have a database article and a print resource and a primary source and a website. And kids would do that, and they would take the first source that they found and be done with it, and not really challenge themselves to push their research skills. And so this was a fun way to get them to try some things that maybe they hadn't before. Using a crap test, for example, to evaluate a website. For perseverance, working some of those like metacognition questions, right? About like how your research is going and what you can or need to do differently, how you can push through. I've entered the same search term 3 times into Google, Mrs. Hatzidakis, and oddly enough, I'm getting the same result. What should I do? I can't find the information that I'm looking for. So encouraging them to generate key terms, identify sub-questions that are going to help guide their research. Those pieces, I think, worked pretty successfully in getting them to realize what an important step that can be for being successful. Perseverance was certainly one that was near and dear to my heart. And then encouraging them, we did offer a pre-created graphic organizer to keep track of notes. And I did, on the agenda, I did include a link to a folder that has copies of all of those things, so you could certainly go and look at that. But that was part of a lesson. We looked at the graphic organizer that we had created as teachers and talked about the process, about how we took the focus question for the research project and how we broke it down, like why we created a graphic organizer that looked this way. And we encouraged students who were ready to try it to try making one of their own that was maybe a little bit different. It worked really, really well. I was terribly concerned that having what felt to me like a small carrot was going to make this less successful, but the kids really enjoyed it. They enjoyed having some freedom to sort of travel their own path, and also, of course, loved, like I said, seeing their character develop a bit.
Meg, do you want to add anything to that?
Get in there.
Yeah, so we're planning on using this again this year, and definitely now that we've seen the certificate come to life, we just put on our board members of the 100-Point Club who earned that top level of badge system in the Research Explorer. So now that we know how to do that, I think we'll beef it up even more. But we really enjoyed the self-pacing. It allowed us to work with smaller groups and triage some of the issues. We did have to have a conversation with kids about breaking the spreadsheet. And like any student will be able to figure out how to break the spreadsheet, but we warned them that once they broke the code was broken and we couldn't reset it. But that's going to happen. And honestly, we had one instance out of, I think, 250 students doing this. So they really did seem to like it. They loved seeing the different combinations that everybody ended up with. And I think that in the future, we would try to print them and post them so that every kid could see what every kid got. It really was a cool outcome for them. So that's my take on it. We enjoyed it. We'll be doing it again this year.
Cool. Hatsi, do you want to show your other example, and then we'll have Meg show a couple others?
Sure. This one's quite different. I'm not, personally, Craig said I was going to deny the expert label, and I certainly will, because I'm not entirely sure that this is gamifying, but it certainly is personalization. As I was getting ready to move from freshmen to juniors, I really wanted to think about how I could make sure that I was taking training wheels off and not offering the same supports in a junior class that I was in a freshman class. I wanted students to be thinking proactively, reflectively about their own process for learning. I'm constantly telling my students that they, wherever they go after this, whether it's college or a job, their employer or their professor is not going to break their work down into nice, manageable chunks for them with mini deadlines and all those things that many high school teachers do for them. And so the goal of this activity, which we call Going the Distance, is for students to identify their own path to the outcome. So at the start of every unit, we identify our focus questions for the unit, the things that we want to learn, the things that we want them to be able to successfully demonstrate at the end of the unit. And we give them one of these spreadsheets, one per student. So everybody gets their own. This is the template that I use for the start of each unit. I have one from our current unit right now that I could show you like how it is filled in a little bit. But for each unit, I look at what we'll be doing, like the kinds of activities that we'll be doing in class, the kinds of learning opportunities that we'll offer, and I determine appropriate point values. We are a competency-based school, so you can see here that my 3 competencies for my course are content, knowledge, communication, and analysis. So my students don't, for the most part, I don't give them assignments. I don't give them a reading and say, please read and annotate this and answer the questions at the end. The idea of Going the Distance is that the students process that information in the way that works for them. So I do have some students who choose to do exactly that. And those pieces fall under content knowledge. So I created this spreadsheet for them where they can come in and select from a variety of assignments. So you can see here that they could take class notes. In the example that I was just using, they could choose to answer reading questions. They could choose to annotate or take notes on that reading. They could choose to make a personal vocabulary list. There are other options in the other competencies depending on the reading or the content that I provide to them. And so, for example, if they choose to answer those reading questions at the end, this reminder here, of course, here, let me try this one. Of course, it's not working. Oh, there it is. So it will come and give them a reminder of what it is that they should be doing to demonstrate this skill, right? So if I've given them a reading with questions, they should be answering all of the questions. They should be providing complete sentences as appropriate. And just a reminder that they can't submit something for Going the Distance that they're receiving a separate grade for. We encouraged students to create a separate folder in their Google Drive to keep all of their artifacts, as we're called, and those might be, I have a lot of students who would type the answers to those questions, but I also have students who will handwrite them on a sheet of lined paper or directly onto the article, or if they're annotating the article and answering questions, and then they'll just take a picture of that and they'll get the shareable link and link it here for me. This tells them that they can earn a potential 6 points for that. And then when they submit it all to me, I'll come and look at this. And it's really, have you done this? If so, you get 6 points. It's not something where I have 30 different rubrics. Like if you've met the minimum requirements, then you get the points, because this is that prep work. So you can see here that this tells me now that I have completed 6 of my 15 A competency points, and the goal, of course, is to make sure that I'm going to get full credit for this by the due date. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's just a great way of like getting kids to do things. They're in charge of their own learning. You've provided different examples for the students. I just think it's a very unique way, very progressive way. rather than just saying, all right, everyone has to do this tonight, and I'm going to be checking that you did it tonight. So it's definitely a mind shift. And while you said it's not necessarily gamification, it's the whole fact of like that people are learning and they are choosing how they want to earn their points, rather than always being told it has to be done a certain way.
And I really like, especially in our P competency, our analysis, these reflection activities, and I really push students to do them, several times a unit, with the goal of identifying steps that they could improve upon for next time. If you get back a test and you bombed it, thinking about what you did or did not do to prepare for that, and then identifying some things that you're going to do differently next time, just pushing them to think about those things, pushing them to pull the rubric and the assignment sheet back out and look one more time at what they're supposed to do and encourage them to think about those changes. That's really the goal of this activity of going the distance, is that students actively reflect on their own practices and keep the ones that work for them, but recognize the ones that don't work for them. And oftentimes teachers, we take that option out of their hands. We tell them, what activities or what ways they're going to prepare for a discussion or an assessment or a paper. And that doesn't work for every kid. And we don't always give them the option to figure that out.
Sure. And I will state, like, if people are looking at this like, whoa, that's like way too much, like, ugh, like, I mean, obviously this was just after spending a year looking at how the Explore worked, that's how then Jess decided to go to this step. So if you've never done something like this, don't be overwhelmed and say, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this, and just tune out. It took Jess some time, and I was very impressed with the fact that, she came at the beginning of the school year saying, hey, Craig, look what we have here. And it's just really, really cool. And I think you even used some resources of your own to try and figure out how that scripting can work. The answers are out there.
I spent a lot of time online asking people questions to make things work, for sure. And it's all available for sure, as long as you know the right question to ask.
And at the end of this, we're going to share the link to all of these examples that are being shown. So those of you who are interested can take a look and dive in more on your own time. So I'm going to switch gears because I'm being cognizant of time here. And we're now going to ask Megan to show a couple other examples of gamifying.
Hi, everybody. So, where'd it go? I just,
Did you share your, I don't know if you shared your screen yet.
Oh, hold on. My screen, there it is. Okay. All right. So can everybody see the achievement unlocked screen? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Looks great.
So this was born out of, we are a competency-based school, and we were one of the first teaching teams to have Chromebooks in our classroom. So this was really designed as a way for younger students to start to visually track their learning, to try to teach them about the competency-based system while being able to reflect at the end of every unit. So we had a lot of goals in mind. We had a lot of reflection activities at the end of every unit, but we were never quite satisfied with the outcomes for those. Students would look at them, throw them away. It didn't really seem to make sense unit to unit, year to year. So we needed something better. And we're both avid gamers ourselves. So we thought, why not create something that looks like a video game screen that these students now with these technology in their hands could look at week after week, have it up in front of their face, and carry the learning forward month to month, and keep it with them in their drive year to year to track how they've done. So I want to quickly go through this. The self-management is not something that's graded, but our freshmen really needed to work at that. So what happens is, for every single unit that we do, students are allowed to add a level that they feel that they've, quote, leveled up in. So we have an analysis competency, we have a communication competency, literary content, and content knowledge. So they're allowed to pick 2 bars every unit that they feel that they have improved upon. I want to show you a student example of one that's in progress. So this student has only gone through a few units so far, but you can see thus far this freshman has learned in content knowledge. She has maxed out in self-management, but she still has a long way to go in some of the other competencies, which makes sense for where she's at. Wanted to do is allow students to carry forward knowledge with them, some sort of visual reminder of what they've learned. So every unit we say, pick 2 things, 2 visuals, and they go and they do a safe image search that you want to carry forward. So this student has clearly picked something from ancient Rome. We have the Colosseum here. And in one of our units, they were to create an infographic about the reasons for the fall of Rome. And that was the most important knowledge moving forward. So by the end of their year, let me show you a completed version. A completed version can look like this by the time they're all done. Now this student was clearly a little messy in here, but that's not the goal. They can visually track how they do unit after unit, and so just how far they've come and all of the knowledge forward. So it really is quite a personal way for them to be different from their classmates and to track just how far they've come. And this is something that we've noticed from our kids when they provide us feedback at the end that they are very proud of. They email their parents and their case managers about it, and they're able to talk to specific badges and specific skills in detail. And for example, at the end of last year, we had kids, I'm going to flip back to our end of the year example. We had kids say, you know, I never expected to be the literary content expert that I was. And we had our literary content experts get together and we gave them a small prize based on their learning outcomes. So we were really quite pleased with this. We continue to use it. We continue to reinforce this. And at the end, they come out with a product that they're really quite proud of. So that's our achievement unlock.
Now, Meg, you actually don't give points for any of this. This is more of just a student reflecting on how they're working and have something that they can look at the end of the year, saying, this is who I am, correct?
Yeah, this is completely non-graded. No points ever. We watch, we have them do it. We tell them it's time to do it. And they really buy in. We do it from week 1. We start them out with this screen. And by the end, I would say we get full buy-in from students. We never discuss points, but these are the products that we get. And I could flip to any one of my students and achieve this. Just a quick note on how this was built. We built this with a variety of Google drawing layers. It's quite easy to do. These are all individual drawings that we layered. And then we took screenshots and then placed them into this. And we locked it so that students cannot the original content. But if they wanted to add, all they would have to do is go to insert a shape. They insert the shape here. They add their box. And they can add any color that they want to. We try to have them match the color. And then when they go to add their individualized personal learning badges, that's just a safe Google image search that they drag in from their source. So that's our unit.
We had a question from Bob, and which is a great idea. Question of with some of those. So one of the images was an infographic.
Sure.
Right, of their own work, and whether or not the student actually links to that infographic from the actual Google drawing could be another take it to the next step, unless they're already doing that.
So Bob, that's a great question. Right now, we're actually playing around with a learning portfolio for Romeo and Juliet text, and they have a journal. I don't have that example up on my screen, but they have an achievement journal that they do, and they do in fact place in a very similar looking badge to this in which they do hyperlink it. So we have taken that to the next level. Our students are still learning the hyperlinking and screenshotting process. They actually take a screenshot of their own work and then hyperlink it to that work. So that we have taken it to the next level. We haven't quite gotten here yet here, but I would imagine by the end of the year, our students will be ready to finish with that step. Great question.
And Meg, did you have another example you wanted to quickly show?
I do. This is an article of Confederation example that we use. Can everybody see our class coat of arms?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So quickly, what this was, same sort of badge system. They can drag up the badges. Students were involved in a simulation, and what they had to do was create a coat of arms and share that out with the class, and this was all filled out with their justifications. So they were able to talk with their group, collaborate within this Google Doc, drag up the badges, and then make some decisions about what they felt were the most important to them and justify it. And then there was a voting system amongst the class to come up with a class coat of arms. So this was constantly being manipulated by about 35 students at the same time. So that did pose some challenges in terms of digital citizenship. It posed some challenges in terms of correct grammar, punctuation, etc. But this is a really simplistic version of what I just showed you. We use this as our example. You can see some of the same typeset here. But again, a really quick, easy way for students to collaborate in one document and then bring it out to the whole class in terms of badges. And we were able to, as a kind of to break the spreadsheet here, what we were able to do behind the scenes is we actually grabbed these examples and morphed them into one giant coat of arms, which was pretty cool for the kids to see the outcome at the end. They did an activity. We were able to collaborate as a teaching team to create their final coat of arms. So just another way that you can use Google Draw to create quick badges and show some visual learning outcomes.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think the most important piece out of all of this is to remind people that what you did or what teachers do in a non tech environment, a non one-to-one environment, and what you do in a one-to-one environment is like is night and day. It's completely different, and it's a matter of like figuring out. So how do you make sure you're engaging students, and how do you make sure it's effective and it makes sense and it's engaging? Just taking a worksheet and making it digital is not a good idea, right? And I think, you know, these teachers, I give them big props because I don't know if I'd necessarily think about some of the things that they are doing with students. And it's just, you know, how do you take it to the next level? One thing I did want to share myself, because I know that time is almost up here. I will share my screen. Again, something similar to now I'm going into the role of tech integrator here. So kind of what I took what Bob had done, something very similar, worked with our librarian, and you know, we wanted to gamify PD. And so what we had done is, rather than just that 30-day Chromebook challenge, we had different tabs at the bottom and basically gave choice as to what people wanted to learn, what they didn't want to learn. So if they wanted to learn about researching, kind of the same, you know, why reinvent the wheel? Did the same thing of linking to instructions, how to do things, similar thing, the dates. So really liked how Bob had set it all up. You know, when all 6 are done here, they receive a badge, but instead of a certificate, we actually had, and that Google should be more in the middle, we actually had 4 different badges that show up in the 4 corners. So depending on what the person had done, depending on what actual badge showed up. So that's just one example. Another thing that we're doing, changing up this year, is we're using Google Classroom to push PD to staff. And again, it's all voluntary. They can decide what they want to do. The names show up here on the left-hand side in alpha order. I just took them out for this sake. But basically, along the side here, you'll see that, you know, staff earn badges based on when they complete things. We had a tech conference, so if they attended the tech conference, if they presented at it, they earn a badge. And then if they utilize the librarian or myself, either in their PLCs or utilize us to work one-on-one or come into the classrooms, they also earn badges. So we're just trying to find, you know, just as in the classroom, find creative ways to engage in our case, our students are our teachers. And so how do we make sure that teachers are willing to learn, want to learn? And of course, in this case, everyone in the whole school can see that spreadsheet. So everyone in the whole school knows who's doing what. Oh, so-and-so did something on screencast. I'm going to go talk to them. So it's just another way of connecting with one another. And so we'll see how it goes. And one thing that we are doing, we do have some buy-in from our principal, and he's willing to actually put in some money. And so we were going to do a raffle at the end of the year, and offering 4 Amazon gift cards. And based on what you do, you earn certain points. So if you learn on your own through one of our PDs that we put together, you earn 2 entries. If you utilize your tech integrator and a PLC, hey, that's worth 3 entries. So we're showing different. We're trying to showcase kind of like that whole researcher thing. Like if you do this, you get this. But if you do this, we think that's worth a little more. So you get a little more advantage of getting your name put in and picked. So those are just a couple examples. By all means, I'm not an expert. Other people are experts, but I don't know is there anything else? We still have time. Normally we do like a SmackDown or something like that. We really don't have time to do that today, but is there anything that Jen, I don't know if you want to mention anything or.
Sure. So I'll grab the screen real quick here.
Yeah, go for it.
Little screen share. And actually, you inspired me, Craig, and we were doing the HyperDocs interview. When we did that one, I loved your Chromebook challenge that you had. So I actually did that for the first time. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully, is it showing up?
Yep.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So I took we did the Chromebook challenge. We changed it out a little bit from what you did. And I didn't know how it would take, because being new here, and we have a brand new one-to-one, and they it was so funny. They got so competitive about seeing who on the spreadsheet would get the badges that would show up on the spreadsheet. So it was funny to hear the different advisories going, yeah, we got the badge. We got it at 12:28. And it was just so funny. And in fact, today we even did one of their pizza prize parties, because from winning the challenge. And we had 2 different ways. One was the first, I got everything completed, but the other one was who contributed the most useful and helpful tips and ideas in the different, we used just similar to you, Padlet and some other things, but who contributed the most. A lot of them did a lot of sharing extensions, and they could see the extensions that were shared and so forth. But one thing that we did, I had some of the teachers asking about Google Draw, and they said, with Google Draw, the only thing is I really would like it so that they can get to it and they can move things around, but they can't alter the background. So one thing I showed them is that you can go into Slide Master of slides, and you can put your drawing in the background of Slide Master. And then what'll happen is when you present, all the links will work, and when you come out, you can move the game pieces around. So we did kind of a gamification with game pieces, if you will. So they were able to put the game pieces on and move around their content and so forth, but they also could interact. And so that was just one additional step that we did, but it was just something they really got into, and I didn't know how they would take to it, and they did. And it was just really, so you inspired us with that. And that was, that's been a great, so now I'm looking at the next thing you're doing, Craig. I'm like, oh, I love that. That's awesome.
But I think you're actually bringing up a point. Like, you don't have to go to the extent that the other examples were just shared. Just the fact that you can take something that you already have. You already have a Google Drawing, or you already have a Google Slide, adding a game piece, right? Making it a little more fun. Yeah, great.
And the other thing is, I'm going to share my screen again. If you can you tap on my screen?
Yep.
Yep. So let me share the events, because we have coming up soon. So just, in New Hampshire, we do have some upcoming events. One is not listed up here, but it's coming up very soon. We will have a Milford, New Hampshire boot camp through, together with Apps Events, February 27th and 28th. And also, just so you know, April Fools, yes, it's no fools. We're going to be having a boot camp here at Winnicott for both Google Educator Level 2 and for Google administrators. And that will be here over at the Seacoast area on April 1st. So we have some New Hampshire area boot camp and events coming up. And of course, the New Hampshire Summit will be announced. I know where it is, but that'll be announced very soon. So just go to appsevents.com to see the Google events that are going on right there. And as always, come back to the New Hampshire GEG Google Plus page to see what we have going on, to see this session later on. I posted the links to the live event and to our resource links to see what we have and what we have coming up next.
Oh, and you're just reminding me, one thing that I did not share was the actual link to the
I put it out already.
What's that?
I put out the link to our resources already in the questions in the Google Plus page, YouTube, and Twitter.
Good. I think it's goo.gl/O, capital C, capital A, capital L, lowercase sy. Anything else from our other audience out there? Anything else that anyone wants to share? You don't have to. All right, I'll take silence as no. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panel. Again, special thanks to Bob, who's not in New Hampshire, joining us. And I hope that while we all may have been familiar in some fashion or another, hopefully even the people sitting in this presentation, in this Hangout, have learned something new, a new trick or an idea or a tip that, I'm going to try that, but after January 1st. Hope everyone has a great holiday. Have fun, rest up, unplug. I'm going to unplug. It's time to spend time with family and friends. And we'll chat later, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for hosting, Craig.